Well, thank you for joining me. For those who may not know me, I'm Tim Fortescue, a life coach, coming alongside of folks in their personal and spiritual development. And before we get started, just a couple of announcements. First of all, I invite you, if you're joining me live, that next hour, I'm going to have a parts mapping coaching group where you can check in with your own inner system a little more and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. And so if you're watching me live, you can go to my website, faithfullygrowing.com, click on the link that says Parts Mapping Coaching Group and register, and you'll get the Zoom link for the group. If you're watching the recording, you can still go there and register, and I'll let you know when the next group is coming up as I offer them regularly. Additionally, on my website, you can get some meditations along the same lines of what we'll be discussing and doing today on my blog there. And then finally, if you have questions, you can send them to me at tim@faithfullygrowing.com. If you're watching me live, I'll do my best to answer those questions at the end of our time. And if you're watching a recording, you can still send me your questions to tim@faithfullygrowing.com, and I'll do my best to engage with you and to answer those questions if I can. Well, I don't know about you, but while I don't doubt that my early spiritual mentors and communities were well intentioned, however, the truth of my belovedness, that this is indeed my core identity, was rarely taught or revealed to me. And although I'm much older now, it's just been over the last few years that I've really begun to tap into my belovedness and to know and really believe that. In my early, more formative years as a Christian, and let me pause here and say that if you're not a Christian, don't tune me out. Uh, the Christian faith is my background and much of what I know, but know that I also believe that God, or whatever you prefer to insert there, is at work in your life and your journey. But in my early, more formative years, I learned about the baptism of Jesus in Matthew 3. Only a little bit of Bible here, and I'm going to move on, I promise. But the focus of Jesus's baptism was it being the gateway to the beginning of his earthly ministry. And some of you may remember verses 16 and 17 in Matthew chapter 3, where it says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. And until fairly recently, it hadn't dawned on me that at this point, Jesus hadn't done any miracles or passed the testing that we read about in the next chapters. However, he was still the beloved and pleased God. And I want you and me to know that we're beloved, deeply loved, even before we have done or do anything. And it's okay to love ourselves. In fact, it's essential so that we can love others well. The internal family systems, or IFS model, is the primary modality that I use in my coaching practice. And it's helped me greatly in embracing my belovedness more and more. And I'll be sharing today in light of what I've learned in that model. And you may be familiar with the movie Inside Out. The tagline of the movie is "Meet the little voices inside your head." And if you're not familiar with the movie, you can easily find the trailer online. But the movie is based on the internal family systems, or IFS model, that was founded by Dick Schwartz. And the characters in the movie are disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and anger. And they are preteen Riley's emotions or parts as she copes with a move across the country and the new situations that brings. And it's not just what happens inside her own mind, it's how Riley's parts, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and anger, interact with and set off her parents' parts too. And we all have voices, emotions, and parts, among many other things inside of us. And today, I'm going to talk about how tuning into and being more aware about your internal world, my internal world, and internal system can help us lean into who we really are and to our belovedness. So let's look at 6 things. First, let me point out that it's the nature of the mind to contain an indeterminate number of subpersonalities or parts. We're all multiple. I'm sure you've heard someone say, oh, a part of me really likes this and a part of me really doesn't. It's the nature of the mind to contain an indefinite number of subpersonalities. And this is natural, universal, and it's useful. Trauma doesn't cause the phenomenon of multiplicity. Though burdens from traumatic experiences make parts more extreme and conflicted internally, no doubt. As a subpersonality, each part has its own characteristics, full points of view, as well as emotions, beliefs, and behaviors. For example, a resentful part may also feel hurt or sad, have many opinions, and reveal itself through the body in certain ways. And often these subpersonalities are saying things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. And this heightens our insecurities and hinders us from living into the reality that we're deeply loved. Second, everyone has a self. And so, what do I mean by self? And make no mistake, I mean that with a capital S. And some of you may be triggered by that. And if you are, hang in there with me for just a bit. But self describes the essence of you, how you came into the world, and who you are when you're feeling things curious, compassionate, confident, courageous, clear, creative, and connected, and some other descriptors of self are playfulness, patience, presence, perspective, and persistence, and other things that don't necessarily begin with a C or a P. And if the capital S self can be triggering for you, first I invite you to notice the parts that are triggered and then see what they may want you to know and see if this helps them or not. From a Christian perspective and worldview, I like to think of self as my beloved self. And as I mentioned before, being the beloved child of God that I was created to be. Number 3, our parts are forced into roles they don't like due to trauma and attachment injuries. The impact of unsafe and negative experiences burdens parts with extreme emotions and sensations and memories that get locked away, causing other parts to protect against the re-experiencing of these burdens. In addition, parts may carry burdens inherited by the family or absorbed by the culture of society. I know my Appalachian roots, in part, sometimes shame me for betraying my ancestors by being the first to break some unhealthy cycles that are and were so familiar. And even though my parts think this, and that's my intention, my intention is really to learn and grow and to heal them rather than abandon or betray them. And this understanding helps them to soften a little bit and helps me to be a little more curious. Number 4, the non-extreme intention of each part is something positive for the individual. There are no bad parts. And the goal in getting to know yourself and your parts isn't to eliminate parts, but instead to help them find their non-extreme role and to be unburdened. Parts hold information and other gifts worthy of discovery and reclamation. And at their core, parts also hold qualities like calm, curious, compassionate, confident, courageous, clear, creative, and connected, or playfulness, patience, presence, perspective, and persistence. And again, depending on your upbringing, the idea that people are basically good can be triggering or suspect. And for those from a Judeo-Christian background, it might be helpful to remember that humans are declared first and foremost to be created in the image of God. Yes, this image has been covered by sin or flaws, mistakes. However, if we can translate original sin as burdens, we're talking the same kind of language. All right, number 5 out of these 6 points that I'm pointing out. As we develop, our parts form a complex system of interactions internally, much like a family or group of people who are polarized or form alliances and hierarchies. Similar to external relationships, when applying family systems techniques to the inner system, and that inner system can be reorganized just like a family can. And when that happens, parts can change fairly rapidly, and the transformation process can begin. And I know that I've experienced this personally, and I've seen clients experience that. And then finally, change in the internal system will affect change in the external system, and vice versa. The implication of this assumption is that the dynamics of both the internal and external systems should be assessed. Changes in our internal system don't happen in isolation. They're part of a context such as external relationships with family members, significant others, coworkers, and so on. And before I wrap up here with some information and lead us in a meditation and then answer your questions if you have them, I want to invite those that are joining live. First of all, you can join me next hour in a parts mapping group that I host regularly on Fridays. You can register through my website. If you're watching a recording, you can still register there, and I'll let you know about the next group that is coming up. Additionally, while you're on my website, if you check out my blog, there are some recorded meditations, much like the one that we'll do in a bit, and along the same lines of what we're talking about here. And then finally, if you're joining live, email me your questions. If you're watching a recording still, email me your questions to tim@faithfullygrowing.com, and I'll do my best to respond and to answer those questions. Well, let's look before I'm going to tell you a story, and then we'll jump into our meditation. But let's look at 4 intentions for looking internally and tapping into our belovedness more. The first intention is to liberate parts from their extreme roles. Through the process of unburdening, parts become less constrained and they shift into a more preferred, less rigid role in the system. And our parts bring us gifts, and these gifts can shine as parts are unburdened and less constrained. Intention number 2, to restore trust in self. or beloved self leadership. As a natural leader, self energy respects input from the parts, who in turn respect the self to effectively lead and heal the system internally and externally. Third intention, to achieve balance, harmony, and wholeness. Internally and externally. Internally, to differentiate the inner system of parts and release beloved self energy, and to help parts get along and work together with less conflict. And then externally, to help parts express and engage more harmoniously with others, with the outer world. And then the fourth intention of just tapping into our internal system and our belovedness is to bring more self energy to external systems. As an individual heals, their beloved self energy can be healing for others in the world. And maybe you have parts that say you're unlovable. I know when I type belovedness on my computer, spell check wants me to correct it to beloved mess. And maybe this isn't a coincidence. Maybe life is a beloved mess, but in this beloved mess, we too need to know that we're beloved. Let me tell you a story, and then I'll lead us in a meditation to check in with our parts. So Henry Nouwen shares in his book, Life of the Beloved, a story of a prayer service that he routinely led for a small group of people. And some, but not all of the participants of this service had disabilities, mostly in their brain development. And right before the service began, a woman with a cognitive disability named Janet said to Henry, "Can you give me a blessing?" And Nouwen, being Catholic, responded in an automatic way by quickly making the sign of the cross on her forehead and saying something about Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But rather than being grateful for this action, Janet was bothered. "No, that doesn't work. I want a real blessing," she says. So Nouwen tells her he'll give her a blessing at the end of the prayer service. And so towards the end of the service, with about 30 people sitting around, Henry Nouwen explains that Janet has asked for a special blessing. And not really being sure what was expected of him, he stood up. And as soon as he did, Janet stood and quickly moved towards him. And he was wearing a white robe with big flowy sleeves that extended past his hands. And as soon as Janet reached him, she embraced him and put her head against his chest. Henry put his arms around her so that she disappeared in the folds of his big, white, flowy vestments. And from the most real place in his heart, he said, "Janet, I want you to know that you're God's beloved daughter. You're deeply loved by God." And it didn't stop with Janet. Another disabled woman asked for a blessing. Then one of the assistants, a 24-year-old student, asked for one. And so it went. Each person being embraced, enveloped in white, and told the truth that they are beloved, personally seen, and deeply loved by God. Not once or once in a while, but always, in every moment. So let's take a minute and check in with our inner world. Just take a minute and pause and take a couple deep cleansing breaths. You can close your eyes if you want. If you prefer, you can just let your gaze rest softly in front of you. Just pause and just notice the parts that are coming up, maybe around, yeah, being loved, being beloved. Maybe there are parts that say, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough. Or, oh, I really messed up in that conversation. I should have done better. Just kind of notice a recent conversation or event that brings up some thoughts, feelings, actions, impulses. Just notice what's coming up. And as thoughts or parts arise, just let them know that you see them. Sometimes it's helpful for me to imagine parts joining me around a table or coming into a classroom. Some may be hesitant to come in and they may just peek around the door, maybe want to stay in the hall. Some may come in but want to sit in the back corner. Some may be right up front, just eager to ask questions. Just notice what's coming up. If it's a conversation, maybe it's, oh, I can't believe I said that. Or I wonder what that person thinks of me now. Maybe there's a feeling of shame. Just welcome those parts in. Notice how they're doing. I'm just going to pause a bit and let you continue just to check in with your inner world and notice those thoughts, feelings, actions, impulses, or maybe beliefs or something else that may be arising. Just pause and keep tuning in to your inner world for just a bit. Maybe pause and, if it feels right, ask, who could use some attention today? Raise your hands if they're in the classroom and just have your parts raise their hands. And whose hand's the highest? Which part do you notice the most? Just kind of check in and see who could use attention most right now. And maybe you're having problems teasing out just one part. It's okay just to be. There's no agenda. And let your parts know that too, that we just want to get to know them better and allow them to get to know us. But if you can notice one part, or maybe it's a group of parts. I know often we hear about the onion and peeling back layers. When I'm checking in with my parts, I like to think of it's more like a garlic bulb. And if I'm thinking about a triggering conversation, there are multiple facets on that clove. Maybe it's easier for you just to engage that clove together, but if you can, there's one part that you're noticing the most, just see if they could come forward if you're in a classroom and join you. Just let them know you'd love to spend some time with them if they'd like that. And just have them wait for a minute and check in with your other parts that may be coming up and see if there are any fears Or maybe say, like, why are you choosing that part? I would like some attention too. See if they have any fears or concerns, let them know that you hear them. And just ask if they'd be willing to soften back, give you a little space so that you can spend some time with the part that you're noticing the most right now. And if they can't step back, maybe they need your attention most right now. So be open to that. And if your parts did soften back and there's one that you see that really needs your attention right now, check in for a minute and see where you notice it in or around your body. Maybe it's a sensation. Often I feel a constrictedness or a heaviness in my chest. Or maybe it's a tingling in the extremities or in the lips. Maybe it's an image, like a Tasmanian devil just barreling through. Maybe it's a color. Just check in and see, how do you know that this part is the one that needs your attention, wants your attention right now? If it's a sensation, just tune into that, like a tightness in the chest or a constrictedness. And if you can get a sense of that part that is just most prevalent right now, check in and see how you're feeling toward that part. And if you're sensing some curiosity or some calmness, some of those C words, or playfulness, or some of the P words, if you're experiencing some just, I want to get to know you more, just kind of let that part know that is up for you right now. Let it know that, and that you do just want to get to know it. And again, no pressure, no agenda, no need to do anything. Just be. Maybe it may have been a while since you've been with this part, and just let it know you want to be with it now. Maybe ask, what do you want me to know? And I encourage you too, if you're watching this as a recording, to pause as often as you and your system need to give yourself the space and the time to engage. Is there anything you want to share with this part? Oh, you're doing your best. I can see how hard it is to maybe try to make me get it right. I know you don't want me to mess up. You got the best of intentions. Just think it. See if there's anything else that it may want to share with you. Let the part know that this isn't the last time, that you're going to try to get to know it. You'd like to spend more time with it if it would like that. And if it would, let it know that you'll check in maybe later today or in the next couple of days and see how it's doing. See if it has questions for you. See if it may want to teach you anything. Let it know that you know it has gifts. You need those gifts. And that you're maybe not the person that it thinks you are. And that it's not alone. And that you want to help it too. And then as we close, check in with all your other parts that may have arisen. Maybe they weren't the most prevalent, but they want some attention too. And let them know that they can have a chance too. You'd like to spend more time with them if they'd like that. See how they respond. We'll close out our meditation for now. Just take a couple deep cleansing breaths. Just breathing in that beloved self energy, that you're beloved, and let your parts feel that. You can open your eyes if they were closed and come back into the space where you are now. And let me close us out with this, just like Henry told Janet in the story. I want you to know, and I want me to know. I want us all to know that we're God's beloved. We're precious in God's eyes. We're beautiful human beings. You are a beautiful human being. And you and I are deeply loved. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I hope it was helpful. I don't see any live questions that have come in, but I do want you to know if you're watching this recording, email me your questions to tim@faithfullygrowing.com. On my website, you can also find on my blog some recorded meditations similar to what I've shared today. Additionally, join me for a parts mapping group sometime. I hold them on Fridays. You can reserve a spot on my website, faithfullygrowing.com, but would love to meet you and just explore that inner world together. And if you're watching me live at the top of the hour, I'll have a parts mapping group that you can join now and join me live in just a bit. But if you're watching the recording, again, send me your questions, tim@faithfullygrowing.com, and join me for a parts mapping group in the future. And so thanks again for your time. Take good care of yourself, and know that you're beloved.